Listen up. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this podcast belong solely to the podcast participants, and not to any participant's employer, organization, committee, or other group or individual. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. You know, for fun. So lighten up and enjoy. Oh, Stomping Jen.
Yes, Sawtooth ring.
We are here again for a very special episode. This is after school worthy.
After school worthy?
Yes, it's a very special episode.
It's like an after school special?
Sort of. We're going to be talking about the UMass Amherst Poetry Society, which, if you listen to this podcast, you will know that is where you and I met.
It's true.
We're going to talk to some of the people who were there.
At the beginning.
Who have witnessed the meeting of Sawtooth and Jen.
Oh, my God.
But what's really interesting is we're also going to talk to some folks who came after us and continued on the UMass Amherst Poetry Society.
Very cool.
Right, and we're going to understand what they did and then what they went on to do potentially in other areas, right? So this is exciting stuff. But it's very...
What?
It's very...
What is the word?
Really, it's about the beginning of Sawtooth and Jen in some ways. This is our origin story in a weird way.
It's like a Marvel
movie. Are you ready to do this?
Yeah.
I'm a little nervous.
Don't be nervous.
Will you hold my hand when I play the intro music?
These people don't bite.
I know one of them bites. We're going to get to that.
All right.
Okay, here we go. The Soft Serve Podcast. Creamy, delicious ideas without the creepy truck. Stomping Jen, why are you laughing? 'Cause I'm singing again. We're going to talk about poetry and how we met. Stomping Jen, let's get to it.
I gotta tell you.
What are you gonna tell me?
I went in our garage, in like the bowels of our garage, and I literally struck gold. I found a whole pile of shit from back in the day.
Yeah. I see that pile sitting in front of you.
I know, and you didn't even want to look at it.
Yeah, so that pile of shit, a lot of that is from our time that we spent in the UMass Amherst Poetry Society, right?
It's true.
Which you started with one of our guests here.
Yeah.
Right, so let's go around and let's say hello to some of the people who are here with us. And I'm going to start with that person who you started the UMass Amherst Poetry Society with. What year would that be?
Oh, God. Was it freshman year? It was freshman year, so it was like 95, 96.
1995. Let's do the math. How many years ago was that?
26.
26 years ago. Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's say hello to Tim-O. Tim-O. Hi, Tim.
Greetings and salutations, my friends.
Oh my God.
Once again, we meet.
It's like we never left.
Well, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
It's my pleasure.
I'm really excited to talk to you about the beginnings of the UMass Amherst Poetry Society. We need a shorthand for that.
What? UMass Amherst?
Yeah, we're just going to say the Poetry
just
Society.
Poetry Society.
Okay, I can't say all of that. My mouth is already getting dry.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
UMaps?
UMaps.
UMaps.
I like UMaps. Yeah. That'll work.
Yeah.
And we're not going to do UMaps.
No.
We're going to do the Poetry Society.
I agree.
Yeah. Right, 1996, 26 years ago.
Yeah.
Something like that, right?
Yeah.
That's a long time ago.
It was a long time ago.
But that also means that's almost as long as we've been together.
That's true.
Which is also frightening in its own way. So you, too, are the original founders, I will say. And we're going to get to that in a minute.
Right.
But there's some other folks here, right?
Let's talk to the other folks.
There are some folks here who were participants in, who would come to the meetings and read poetry and listen to poetry, and some of those folks are here. I am one of them, right?
We've said this
before. I showed up. I walked into a meeting and I read a poem.
You showed up fall of 96.
Yeah, and I have here in my hand that very poem I read, the one that captivated you.
I don't know if it was your poem that captivated me.
The one that made you become obsessed with me.
Oh, sure.
There are poems in that pile in front of you that are all about me and your unrequited love for me. And we're going to get to all of that later. Now, another person who would come to these meetings, right, whom I met there at the Poetry Society is the one, the only, Joshua Michael Stewart, the official, unofficial poet laureate of the Soft Serve podcast. Hello, Josh.
Hello, everyone. How is everyone?
We're doing great. Thank you.
We're talking to you people.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
And I have to say, Josh turned out to be a real poet. Now,
he's a poet.
If I'm thinking back to the first time I saw him there and the first time I heard him read, I'm not sure I would have been on that horse, but he proved us all wrong.
It's true. He's stuck with it.
And he's absolutely killed it. He's published everywhere.
It's true.
He's come on here and he's talked about it, and you can find these episodes he's been on.
There are many. Yeah.
Many, and he's talked extensively about it. But I'm proud in a lot of ways to have known him all of these years and to have seen him grow in this way.
Yeah.
It's been amazing.
Yeah, it's very cool.
To think back to when we were all undergrads at this poetry society at UMass Amherst. So, now another person, I'm going to go out on a limb here. I don't know if he's going to be able to answer. He's eating sushi right now. He told us. He called in and he was going to feed sushi to these children he has. This is Ted. Are you there, Ted?
I'm here. I heard you with a nice intro there, and I jumped up from the table.
Oh.
Unmuted myself and went to a private room. So,
well, welcome, Ted. Thanks for being here. We're going to definitely talk with you more. And I remember hanging out with you and listening to poetry with you and hearing your poetry and all sorts of things. So it's exciting to.
I feel, and thank you. I feel like I'm trying to forget any poetry I wrote when I was an undergrad.
Oh, come on. That's what it's there for. Posterity.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's good. It's good to have you here. Thanks for setting aside time to do this.
Yeah,
so,
we appreciate it.
Yeah. Now, another guest we have here joining us on our Poetry Society panel is George Myers. Now, this is the first time I'm meeting George, so I don't know if our paths crossed when we were in the Poetry Society or not. Stomping Jen, do you remember?
So Josh swears that there were some open mics that George and his fellow human who came after us were at.
Okay.
But I don't know that I quite remember. I think you and I, when we were done with UMass, we kind of left.
Yeah.
I don't really remember leaving.
Let's give George a chance to say hello to us and tell us what he remembers.
All right, sure.
Hi, George. There's a cat walking across George's screen that may be interfering with his inability to unmute. All right, here we go. Hi, George.
Hi, everybody. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Sure. Now, go
ahead.
Please, I was going to ask, do you remember anybody here in this meeting from your time in the Poetry Society?
Definitely Joshua. I mean, we crossed paths quite a bit, saw him read and continued to cross paths. And I do recall, the early days that we went to the meetings where basically just Ben and I, being interested in poetry, went to those meetings and didn't know anybody and heard people read. And we went to quite a few of them. So I'm guessing we were in the same room, but it wasn't the same connection I think you and Jen made.
Yeah.
Well, we left. You finished in 98.
Yes.
In May of 98.
That's right.
And I was done by December of 98. So I don't know what years.
Now, I remember a summer.
Wait, hold on.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, George.
Ben and I came in fall of 98.
Yeah. So Sawtooth was out and I was like basically out because I finished early and doubled up on classes, so I don't know how involved I was at that point. Yeah.
So if I can just jump in real quick, I remember the first meeting that George and Ben, and there was a third person who came with you guys, who I can't remember what his name was. But you guys came to our first meeting of that fall semester, and you guys talked about this painter, minimalist painter, and like you had this painting, and all it was like this one line, like just this one like blue line, and you guys went on this whole rampage about this avant-garde artist, and we were always trying to figure out, like, well, first of all, it was like, you know, is the painting supposed to look like, you know, vertical, or is it supposed to be horizontal, you know, with the one line? And then it turns out that this whole painter was like just some bullshit you guys made up. So that was the first meeting. And I know I was there, and I know Chanel was there, and Jen, you must have been there, but I know Brad, would have been gone by then.
Yeah, we're 2 minutes into this and I'm already embarrassed.
Don't be embarrassed.
Yeah, so that was actually probably our friend Tom.
Yeah, it was Tom,
who was not particularly artistically oriented in that way, but he used to actually like really make fun of us for being interested in sort of avant-garde works, and that was, I'm not blaming him for that, but that was like him kind of making fun of us and us challenging him on that, and then like taking that stupid feud into a public space to try to like sell it. Yeah. Really. Wow. I'm really embarrassed that we did that.
Oh, no.
And we can count on Josh to remember it all of these years later.
But it left an
bring
impression.
It back up.
It left an impression on Josh. So yeah.
Timo, did you want Timo? Did you want to jump in here?
I did. Like, now that Josh mentioned that, I think I was there as well, and because my vague recollection was initially being really annoyed because as like the founding president, I was just like, I should be in charge of this meeting, and these guys are hijacking it. And I think it just grew in more and more intriguing. I was like, are these guys for real? What is it? And I just have a vague recollection of that. But
yeah. Well, George, thanks for coming here, and thanks for not leaving immediately after that embarrassing revelation about your avant-garde painting. But we have another guest joining us, and he was referenced earlier.
He was.
It is Ben. Hello, Ben.
Hey, how are you? Were you just telling the story of that painting?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, man. Whew. Do you remember the name that you came up with? I think it was. I'm pretty sure it was Bayron Schultz.
Yeah.
Yep.
Good job.
Well, that is creativity and youth in its prime. I'm going to give it one of these.
That sounds awesome.
Yes.
I wish I could recall this.
Yeah. Well, Ben, we were just kind of going around and talking about who we all were, and Ben was one of the folks who helped take over the Poetry Society after what I'm going to call the original founders kind of moved on and went on to do other things. So we're going to talk a little bit now about the original founding of the Poetry Society. So George, Ben, just hang out. We got a bunch of questions for you coming up. So, but jump in if you have something you wanna offer too. Jen and Tim O, how did you come to start this Poetry Society? I really would like to know.
Let me see.
I remember clearly.
Okay. All right. Tim
Timo,
seems
go
to
ahead.
remember.
All right. Well, I was interested in poetry in high school, and I had written a few haiku that got published somewhere from some, I don't know what it was. It's some college associated paperback of some sort. And I was very interested in writing poetry at that time. And when I went to my it wasn't orientation, it was went scouting for UMass, and they gave you a tour out there. I was like, oh, they have lots of student organizations. Do they have a poetry society? And someone was like, oh, yes, they do. And I was like, great, I'm going to join it when I get there. And when I got there wasn't one. And I was like very disappointed. And then I was like, somebody said, you could just start your own. And I was just like, I could. And maybe I should. And so I just started hanging flyers, and I got a meeting together. And that was it. And I know Jen was there at the first meeting, and one of my friends from UMass was there at the first meeting. And I was trying to be very democratic about it. I was like, I don't need to be the president. We need to decide who's going to do what and then who wants to be a leader. And then my friend was just like, I think Tim should be the president. And I was just like, well, if you say so, of course, yes, that is fine with me. And then it just went off from there.
That's true. That sounds about right. So we had to register it as a registered student organization.
Yeah.
And my roommate,
RSO.
Yeah, my roommate Christine and I met with Tim, and we started it. I don't know. We started it. We posted it. We figured out how to navigate the UMass system and how to become a registered student organization and how to get funding. And I don't think we ever actually had office space, but we had regular meetings. And
so did you two do this organizational work together before you actually held a first official meeting of the Poetry Society?
I don't know. I remember meeting you. I remember there being a blackboard. I don't know, in a room.
Yeah.
I don't know. There was a bunch of people that showed up. I don't think there was very many at the beginning. And then we just started advertising it. Yeah.
Tim, were you able to discover, had there been a poetry society before you that went defunct, or tell me about that?
Okay, so when I went to figure this all out, I went to the student organization body, whatever it was called, and I said, I thought there was a poetry society. I said, oh, well, no, but here's their charter. You can have it. And I was just like, oh, well, then I can just use this to revive the Poetry Society. But when I read it, it was pretty rinky-dinky in my opinion. So I was like, we're going to have to rewrite this, which we did. We rewrote it, and we just added a few things here and there, and nothing serious.
Yeah.
And I was doing some research earlier this week, and I went on the UMass website to see if they are currently formed in some way still. And they are. And they still have that charter.
Oh.
Yeah, it was last updated. Yeah, it was last updated in 2016.
That's cool.
Which is still 20 years after you updated it.
I know, right?
Back all those years ago, Timo.
Way back when.
I know.
Yeah. So when you held the first meeting, you did all of this work.
Yeah.
You revitalized the Poetry Society student organization. That was Ted. There's some sort of sushi meltdown happening over there, wherever he is. When you got all the organizational stuff together and you held your first meeting, do you remember the first meeting when people started showing up?
No, I remember people.
Yeah.
Here and there. I remember we used to meet a lot in Central because Christina and I lived in Central. So there was a lot of meetings that happened in Central. There might have been a meeting or two that happened in Butterfield when it used to be Butterfield.
Yeah.
For people who remember that. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I guess when you started...
Yeah, there was that guy. What was his name? Magical Myko or me.
Sharky?
No.
Sharky?
No, there was some guy. He reminded me of Willy Wonka. We've been in his room once. I remember that. But
when I started going to these meetings, they were in the campus center in the basement.
We took it out of the dorms and made it a little bit more serious, I think.
Yeah. Why did you do that? Why did you take it out of the dorms?
Loosey-goosey, maybe.
What does that mean?
I don't know. What do people do in the dorms?
Timo, do you remember meeting in the dorms and then deciding you needed to take this to a better space? Is that something you remember?
I remember meeting in the dorms, but I don't remember how we came to the decision to meet in a different space. Basically, you had to reserve it, and that required an additional administrative step.
Yeah.
So it took us a while to get to that stage. I think for at least the first semester, we were in Jen's.
Dorms.
Yeah, we were in Jen's room or whoever was available.
Yeah. for sure.
Yeah, we had quite a few meetings in Jen's room.
So did I.
Not in that year.
For the record.
Not
I had
then.
many meetings in Jen's room.
Oh my God. All right. Moving along.
Yeah, so
Yeah, and Tim, as you were recollecting, there were some characters that were part of that group.
yeah, now somebody wrote in the chat, Joshua Michael Stewart wrote, who was the vampire kid, and there was a guy.
You're right. There was a guy,
And I know his name. His name was Matt, and there were lots of eccentric people who came to the Poetry Society.
Yeah.
And one of the things I want to ask Josh, and I have an answer for myself, is how you discovered it. The Poetry Society, as somebody who wasn't involved in the founding, like how did you discover it, and how did you begin to get involved with the Poetry Society?
I discovered it by the I want to call it the Advocate, but it wasn't. Whatever the
Collegian.
The Collegian newspaper, and you guys put an ad in that.
Oh, look at us advertising.
And I just saw it in there. It was either that or on a flyer. And then I just came to the meetings. And, like you were saying earlier about how you didn't think I would be a poet, from the first time you heard me read until now. I went into I wanted to get into poetry, but I knew absolutely nothing about poetry, other than whatever, Robert Frost poem that they forced us to read, in high school or whatever. I was a music kid. I was a jazz kid. In fact, the way I got into any type of poetry was through jazz. I was, into jazz, playing jazz, listening to jazz. And my best friend went to UMass Lowell. And as you know, you can't go to Lowell without knowing Jack Kerouac. And then, of course, through that, you meet Allen. You're introduced to Allen Ginsberg and all the beat poets who are heavily influenced by jazz. The first real poet I ever read was Langston Hughes, and again, the only reason why I chose him was because of his blues poems and his jazz poems. And the first contemporary poet I read was Charles Cynic. And again, the only reason why I read Charles Cynic was because his book, which came out in 96, Walking the Black Cat, the cover of the book looks like a jazz album.
Huh.
And that's the only reason why I picked it up. And then, of course, there's all this surrealist crap going on, and that was that was like the epiphany. That was like this is poetry. Like poetry can be this.
Yeah.
And of course, and then you got Charles Cynic, you got James Tate, and of course James Tate teaches at UMass, and every poet in the world goes to UMass thinking they're going to take a class with James Tate, and then of course then you're connected with Russell Edson, and so on and so forth. But yeah, I wanted to. I was completely green about poetry, and I was like, I didn't want to change majors and become an English major or anything. So I was like, this would be the next best thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've said this before, and it bears repeating. I think I was incredibly lonely and looking for friends. I had moved into this house where I didn't really know anybody. I didn't live on campus. And I spent 2 years without friends going to this major university. And I think that fall semester, I just took stock of myself. I was like, oh, I've got to go do something. I've got to get involved with something. And I liked writing, right? I could write poems. I like most moody, self-obsessed, narcissistic teenagers, I would scribble poems in my notebook, my spiral-bound notebook, which I still have. It's like, I'm going to go give this Poetry Society a shot. I think I saw the flyer somewhere. And
those flyers were super effective. Better than social media.
I was walking through the campus center. I saw the flyer. I took it home. I put it on my desk. I stared at it for a while. right? And I said, well, this is your moment, Sawtooth. This is your moment to do something, to change the course of your life. So I wrote a poem, which I will read here later.
Oh my God.
I wrote this poem. I'm going to read it on this episode.
Yeah.
I walked into that room, and there I did not notice you, Stomping Jen.
That's true, for very many months.
Yes, but I noticed Tim O. He's not the tallest person, but he's very muscular.
Oh my gosh.
He has jet black hair.
Where is this going?
We're sharing my recollections, and he was leading the group.
Ah.
I said, who is this fella? I sat down. I listened to people read poems.
And you were like, these are my peeps.
Well, then I stood up. I said, I have got a poem to read.
Oh my God. All right.
And I will read this poem later. And that's how I got involved.
Excellent.
Right?
Yes.
Now let's ask Ted.
Yes.
We haven't heard much from Ted. Now I see he's done eating this sushi that he was eating before. He's leaning against a wall of some kind. Now let's ask Ted how he got involved with the Poetry Society.
I'll have to dredge my memory for this. So I believe I came, I think probably like many of us, as an angsty freshman who had written poetry in high school. I believe there was a poem that I had published in my high school newspaper called The Cynic, which was terribly embarrassing, but very apt for like a 14-year-old to write, I think. And I think I was just walking through the long concourse of the student union, kind of my freshman year. And I mean, I feel like I must have, I don't remember who was at the table. I feel like it must have been like Tim and Stomping Jen who were there, though.
Oh, right. We had
Could it have been anybody
tables.
else?
We had tables. I forgot about the tables.
Like, the first week, you go through and there are all the clubs. See, there's like the poster sale and all the clubs the first week that you could sign up for. And I think this was the one that sort of struck my fancy.
Huh.
And I was like, I know what poetry is. I've written poetry. I should go to this meeting.
You like Leonard.
Also, we were selling brownies, and they were delicious.
I didn't make them.
Oh, you were selling
Where did we get brownies from?
We were doing it to raise money, I think.
Yeah. Like a bake sale?
Yep. Now,
Wait. Ted was like you liked Leonard Cohen a lot, right? Am I recollecting?
I did like Leonard Cohen. No, you're totally right.
No, I remember that about you.
I did like Leonard Cohen because some girl I dated in high school had introduced him to me. And so I was very into Leonard Cohen.
Okay.
And for our listeners who there may be people who don't know who that is, Leonard Cohen was a musician and poet and writer. He was a Canadian musician, poet, writer.
For you if you don't know who Leonard Cohen is.
There may be some folks who don't know.
Look him up.
Some of the younger kids may not know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'll say he after Trump got elected, he died. He couldn't handle it. He was like, I'm checking out. Fuck this. I have to say, I saw Leonard Cohen 2 years before he died. You did. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, it was an amazing show. Absolutely amazing. Now, I want to ask George and Ben, who did go on to take over the leadership of the Poetry Society. How did you come to get involved in the poetry club? Was it a similar way? Was it walking through a concourse? Was it seeing a flyer? I'm interested in hearing this. So we'll let you go first, Ben.
I mean, I don't have a clear-cut day in my mind when that happened, but there was, it's probably a similar kind of thing. Like, I think George and I both had like a pretty big interest in poetry, and we were already living that sort of semi-beat kind of mind, reading all those folks and getting kind of hooked into some odd kinds of music and performance. And I think we were just intrigued by, I don't know, the idea of a poetry society. I don't even remember where we discovered it or how. It was probably the same kinds of things, like the collegiate or the tabling. And suddenly it was like, let's go to this event, these meetings. I think it was like a Tuesday night or whatever. I don't know. I don't remember. I don't know, George, you have a good memory, right? You remember?
I think it was. I think you're pretty much right. Yeah, that we went to those meetings, and we, as you, Joshua, so kindly recollected. I think we had this sort of thing where it was. I don't want to say it was confrontational, but we were just sort of really throwing our energy out into the world and seeing if other people kind of vibed with us. And being really interested in poetry, we'll go into those meetings. And I have a big memory of going, and I think, Sawtooth and Jen, I think you left, and I think there was maybe a vacuum that was created by that. And I vaguely remember Ben and I going somewhat regularly to those meetings. And I think I vaguely remember someone being like, "Do you want to become the president?" And Ben and I were like, and so we became co-presidents, because I think we were both kind of like nervous about it. Mm-hmm. And I think it was really like the grouping of people that had been going to those meetings recognized that someone needed to do it. And I think Ben and I just probably seemed unhinged enough to be willing to take it on.
Well, what was that? Thinking back, what was that like for you, having to step into a leadership role like that? Because my recollection is these meetings were like very well attended. There were lots of people there. It seems like that was probably a pretty early opportunity in your lives to experience leadership and do something like that.
We were pretty active, I think. Like we were in bands and that sort of things. Like, so we were putting on events. So I don't think there was that concept was too intimidating. And I honestly think we probably didn't have the depth of self-reflection to be too nervous about it. I think it was really like we just were like on high speed and looking forward. I don't know, Ben, if you haven't.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it was a combination of an interest in poetry and performance and, confrontational art making with a perspective vision of being a teacher someday. And I think there was at least some part of me, looking back, this is how it looks. Then I don't know if I had that mindset, but there was a part of me that was like, oh, this is like the way you might organize people to talk about literature or talk about poetry. And I always enjoyed, like, I think we would sometimes bring a poem and like talk about it, like a published poem. And I think for me, that was like almost the first place where I wanted to test my chops in a way for what it's like to be in front of people with a literary agenda kind of thing. And it definitely took me to where I am now. So in some ways,
Yeah. Josh.
So I just want to jump in and, after you two left, it was, Chanel and I were, and then I think Tim also left soon after you guys. Chanel and I were kind of like the last of the original guard, and we were leaving, fairly soon, because I left in May of '99. Mm-hmm. And that's why we went to George and Ben and was like, someone needs to take this over. And, it's funny because, they say it's like they were confrontational, but, confrontational art in that. But we dug it. We loved it. We thought they were great. We would have these open mics and everyone would, have their poem and, everyone's like, yeah, and all that, and then these two would go on stage and they would have guitars and then they would drape sheets over themselves and then they would play this song while under the sheet. And, this bed sheet. And so they would just do all these really wacky, strange performance art stuff, even though, mostly we were thinking it's just like a poetry open mic, but they would just bring it to a whole new level. Mm-hmm. And where others may be like, well, this is supposed to be poetry or whatever, but we just loved it. We thought it was great. And of course, there was the time where I wasn't there for this open mic, but there was a a infamous open mic down in that art room in the
art
studio
gallery. Yeah.
I think they poured paint on themselves.
Yeah, I painted George while he played Hank Williams. This is a very like ridiculous concept that we were trying to put together. It was George went up and played like a Hank Williams song, and I think we had like a video camera set up so that it was like pointed toward to you, George, and it was like broadcasting to the audience. Some weird twist there, and then halfway through his song, I started screaming at him from the audience and being all pissed off and upsetting the audience. And then I ran up there with a can of paint and just started, like, I think with my hands, as I recall, just painting him. It made a horrible, horrible mess. And the event had to be paused. The woman who ran the space, Paula, was not pleased, to say the least, man. I mean, she went into a state of anger that it took a long time for us to make up. Like I worked on that for a while. She was not happy. And I remember, I actually felt pretty good. I felt pretty good about what we had done. I mean, at the time, and somebody afterward, this grad student, Steve, his name was, came up to me, or George, I think you were there too, but he said like, yep, performance art, it's always got to have its revolutions, or it's always got to have its, like, he made some comment about it, which put it into like a place of like, oh yeah, this is actually a thing that has some validity in some way. I don't know if it did or not, but
I mean, at the time, did you see these performance, what do we want to call them? Performances as having some kind of connection to poetry in your minds at the time?
In my mind, it did. Yeah, I don't know about you, George.
Yeah, they did, and I also think, not to talk about us too much, but we also did do, a lot of just very sort of more straight poetry work, and the meetings were really focused around published poets, and we would have copies, and we would talk about those, and we would put on open mics with featured readers and things. So we had a particular interest in the sort of performative side of things, but we also had, and I think honored the sort of, written word in more traditional senses of it.
It's interesting to me. I remember when I was attending the Poetry Society, I would sometimes bring in a song, right? Or that the lyrics spoke to me in a particular way, or they felt very poetic to me. Mm-hmm. I think I brought in a Leonard Cohen song once or twice. And I remember there were some people in the group who were like much more traditionalists when it came to poetry. And they're like, those are songs. That's not poetry. We cannot talk about them here. And I'm bringing that up because as we've gone on and done this podcast over 3 years, many, many people in different artistic arenas have talked to me about how they feel there's a poetry to their art, right? Painters, photographers, people who...
all sorts of people.
Yeah, all sorts of
creative
artists
people
connect to poetry and feel like what they do is somehow connected to poetry in some way. It's interesting to me. I feel like for people, poetry isn't just what we think it is, kind of in a classical sense.
It means different things to different people.
Yes, Stomping Jen.
Oh, is that what it means?
So I find that very interesting.
Yeah. That
you were kind of exploring that angle, that piece of it. I want to ask you, Tim O and Stomping Jen, what are your early memories of these meetings and your poetry society as you got it off the ground? Was it what you wanted it to be?
I think so.
Yeah.
I'll let Tim answer though, since he hasn't talked in a while.
Well, I remember being pretty uptight when I was in college. So, I tried to be as democratic and open-minded towards things as possible, but I certainly had my own limited view of what poetry was. But I don't know limited it was. I mean, I was already interested in a lot of the poetry, like James Tate, just like, I thought, he kind of blew my mind open in terms of like what poetry could be. And if I were to go along the route of what, my mother says, it must have rhyme. It's not a poem if it doesn't rhyme, according to my mother. So I can't read her most of the poetry I've written, but yeah, I don't know. How conservative were we in our views?
Yeah, I don't think we were. We just, we would come together, we would read things that we had written, we'd work on them together, we'd get feedback. I think that was mainly what we were interested in at the beginning was, I wrote this poem, I want to read it, I want a safe space to read it out loud and get some feedback on what other people think. And I think that was a forum in which people felt safe doing that. And, yeah, and we built this camaraderie in this community around it, and like, because some of what ended up happening is initially, especially in that original group, is that we would do things not poetry related, but together. Like, so we would have our meetings, then we'd go down to the Blue Wall and we'd get like snacks and we'd hang out for quite some time and we'd go on road trips together and we'd go to the movies. So like we built like a little community that was based around poetry. And UMass is such like a large university. And I think somebody once said to me, or I don't know if this is true, but, like you make of it what you want, you create and you find those people and you create your own little community and it makes it feel a lot smaller.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I found in it, right? I mean, I did have some modest interest in writing and poetry, but I was mostly looking for a community,
a tribe. Yeah.
And I mean, that's what I found there. Right. And though that social aspect of it was so strong for me. Right. I mean, we ended up dating Stomping Jen.
I mean, there were people created out of
getting married and
Poetry Society.
Having children. Ted, I wanted to ask you, do you have recollections of what it was like when you started attending, and was it what you had wanted it to be, the Poetry Society? Do you have observations you want to share about your time there?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I had quite the sort of avant-garde, high-minded notions of Ben and George at the time. I think I probably skewed more towards you, Sawtooth, in so much as I really valued it for its community, and there certainly was a poetry aspect that I really enjoyed to it as well, but I think in the end, I didn't actually really have serious aspirations as a poet. It was just kind of more of a place to find community and to meet people around sort of a shared interest, but then kind of grow and extend beyond that. So I think in that sense, it really sort of was what I was hoping it would be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Josh, I mean, I think of the group of us, in terms of writers, you've gone the furthest, right? And are the most developed and have experienced a lot of success in terms of publishing and just kind of dedicating yourself to this craft, right? We've talked about this. Yeah. I'm curious how much the Poetry Society and what happened there and your experiences there kind of helped clear the path for you to start down.
Yeah, I think it did tremendously. And even though I went there because I wanted to learn more about poetry, like you and like Ted, I wanted a sense of community. Again, like you, I was, to be honest, when I joined, I was in a really, really bad spot. Things were not good for me at all. And, I went there too because I was extremely lonely. I didn't really fit in with wherever I was at that time. So I went there again for community like you guys. And I don't know. I don't know at what point it went from just having curiosity to being very serious about it.
Mm-hmm.
I really don't know when that shift was. I mean, the thing was I've always wanted to be a writer since the age of 6. I know I've always wanted to be a writer of some kind, you know. So it was always there. And then, you know, it was after the Poetry Society, you know, the Poetry Society was done and gone. So then I joined other workshops, and then through those other workshops, then I met my mentor, you know, Ellen Doré Watson. And then that's where, you know, it really, really got serious.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It was never serious for me.
Yeah, it wasn't.
It was not serious.
Why wasn't it serious for you?
So I think for me, you know, in high school, I wrote a lot of poetry as an angsty teen. And then I think you and I met, and then that was the end. That was the end of writing poetry.
What do you mean by that?
Because I didn't feel maybe I didn't feel as angsty.
Do you mean we spent our time making poetry, Stomping Jen?
Stop it. No, I think like that, whatever drive, the need that I felt to write about things, and it just sort of dried up, and that was the end of it. But I looked.
So this is really a testament to me. I mean, you're saying I satisfied you creatively, emotionally,
I didn't
physically.
Say that.
You said you had no needs after you got involved with me.
To write poetry, but then But how many years later, I discovered that I enjoy doing collage art, right? Which was like a completely different type of poetry. So like what I then enjoy doing was taking visual art that I could not draw myself or put together myself and steal it and then put words on top of that. So it's sort of it transformed, I think, over the years into some other
interesting
thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ben and George, I'm really interested in hearing, once you sort of got your legs under you and you were running the group, did you change anything from how it had been working? Did you get in there as leaders of the Poetry Society, Poetry Club, and say, oh, we're going to change this or that? I'm curious if you made any shifts that you can remember in how the group ran. I don't
remember being given too much guidance or being restrictions on the way it had to be run. We did start doing these types of sort of performances under the guise of the Poetry Society. I remember like we would get all these like cheap and free books of poetry and copy poems, and we would just sit out on the, by the pond there and like give poems and books away, and we would like hold doors and say like sponsored by the Poetry Society. We did publish two journals.
At least one. I don't know if there's two.
So I don't recall there being a whole lot of precedent. Not to say that the work before wasn't really great or important, but I don't remember there being like a manual being given to us and us like either saying we're going to do this or like tearing it up and saying we're going to do it our own way. I think we just kind of went with our gut. But Ben, I don't know if you have a.
No, I don't think there was any framework. I don't recall there being an established publication, or was there? Mm-hmm. Was there something?
I don't think we ever pulled one together.
No, there was just that charter, right? Which we mentioned at the top of the top of the episode. Yeah, that still exists in some form. I found it earlier in the week,
which we probably
yeah.
No, we never did a journal. I don't know why.
I thought we had.
Oh, maybe I'm wrong.
Talk a little bit more about that, Tim. What's your memory of that?
I remember trying to put it together, and I remember taking submissions. I remember reading submissions. I just can't remember what we were going to call it. Because I remember the discussions we had about, what are we going to name it? And
Ted, Josh.
I do agree with Tim. I think we got as far as debating what the name was and reading submissions and then never going further with it.
Yeah.
I also recall reading submissions with you, Tim, but I don't really know if it came to fruition. That I don't have a memory of.
Yeah, that makes sense. That would explain why I don't remember the name. That and whiskey.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why it never actually came about was because we could never settle on a name.
That seems ridiculous in hindsight.
Yeah.
The one we published was called "I Have a Dog."
I love it. It's perfect. I have a dog.
And we spent a lot of time fighting over that. I remember like the person I think Mike Braidman who ran it after we did, as I recall. I don't know if that's true. Wanted to call it like Edgar Allan poetry. That always stayed with me as like one of the worst possible things to do, but also somehow interesting too. But yeah, we spent a lot of time going over like, what do we call this thing?
That's funny.
Yeah.
Oh, those silly poets getting hung up on words of all things.
Yeah. So I want to step into the virtual open mic coffee shop space.
Wait, so another memory is you loved hosting those open mics.
Oh, I did. Yeah. And I think, I don't know, somebody here said this earlier, it was an opportunity. Maybe it was Ben. For me, it was a space, the poetry club was a space where I really began to discover how much I loved performing, like how much I loved getting up in front of a crowd and talking, and the adrenaline rush of that. And it goes to something even Josh was saying before, kind of about jazz. I love jazz, and I typically enter a performative space with no fucking plan of what I'm going to say, how I'm going to say it, and I just kind of go. And it could crash or burn. It could be okay. It could be really great. But that's where I discovered my love for,
a microphone
for the microphone, being in front of people and just letting it go and seeing what happens.
Yeah.
I loved all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely enjoyed that.
Yeah. So we're going to have a virtual open mic?
Yes. Stomping
and you're
Jen.
going to be the host?
I am going to be the host. Thank you, Stomping Jen. I asked you all to find a poem from that era and to be prepared to read one. And I don't know if you were able to. If you didn't, that's okay. We're not gonna punish you. But hopefully some of you are able to dig one out. I know I have one. Now, Tim O or Josh, were you able to find one?
Oh yes, I have my graduate thesis.
Oh, I remember Hypnos.
I know. I remember
Published.
I remember the title of this.
Yeah. So Tim O is holding up some kind of bound thing. It's not quite a book. It's
a book.
A thesis of some kind. And it says hypnopomp on the front of it.
Which is a word I invented.
Yep.
Sort of.
And one of those pages looks like it has a pink flag on it. And I think he's gonna read something.
I came somewhat prepared.
Okay, thank you.
But I would like Josh to. Well, we'll save Josh.
Yeah.
Josh's poems are better than mine. So,
maybe not from that era. He's done a lot of work in the last
25 years.
25 years. All right, whenever you're ready, Timo.
All right. I liked this poem a lot because when I was in college, like I said, I was pretty uptight, but I didn't want to be. I was always a shy person, and I never wanted to be. So I tried to break out of my shell, and I think the Poetry Society was a big part of helping me do that. And I remember, just sometimes I would just sit in the middle of the walkway and write something when I had inspiration. I just sit down and write. I didn't care what other people thought of me, this crazy guy sitting in the middle of the pathway writing. But I just decided I don't care what other people are going to think. And so this was kind of part of that need to break free. I call this poem How to Handle Silent Persons.
Okay.
Place your hands on a quest. First, check for responsiveness. Are you dead yet? Maybe. Show confidence, security. Be calm and pleasant. Check for breathing. The breast may rise. The pulse may lie. Resuscitate everything as needed. Check next for bleeding chest or head wounds. Your patient will not be ticklish. Beware of doggedly escaping brain and spinal fluids, but apply no tourniquet. Play strip poker. Win. Suddenly lean them against something sturdy, like a song. Have them hold it, if possible. Cock their chin back with your left. Man the stethoscope with your right. This process will be more difficult for left-handed conversationalists. Kiss the nipple for effect. Discover the ribs and remove. Remove all flammable substances. Smile. By now you have made their acquaintance something special. Insert hands and palm through ribcage. So softly cackle. Grab their flaccid heart with glee. Sigh, then squeeze.
I think I remember that.
Yeah, I have, first of all, thank you for reading that, Tim. And, one of the things I remember the most about your poetry is the playfulness, right? The wordplay, and just, I had to hold myself back from laughing out loud several times as I listened to you read that, because the words are funny. So anyways, that's what I remember about your poems, is they had this this playfulness, and sometimes you would do funny things with the construction of the words too.
I think Tim and I both very much liked E.E. Cummings, as I recall.
Yes, E.E. Cummings.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
We were both fascinated with him.
Yeah.
I remember you had the complete works in your room.
I still have it.
I was impressed by that. That impressed me. I was like, she's all right by my book. Anyone who likes E.E. Cummings has good taste, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Do you remember the kiosk poem you had?
I've got it right here.
I remember.
Do you want to hear it?
Yeah, sure. Read it.
It's longish. Let's see, where is it? The pages of kiosks is dearth. Very much inspired by the Amherst kiosking scourge, I'll call it. So we need a preface here. This was a commissioned poem. This poem was, what was that guy's name? Ted, I think, was a local activist. Sorry. I'm gonna have to write that name down. There was a local activist.
Yeah.
There was a local activist, and he I don't know how I got involved with that guy, but he basically asked me to, because Amherst had wanted to put up these kiosks, and because you couldn't put flyers on telephone poles or any logical place where people would normally see a poster, and they passed these laws, so they said, oh, you can only put posters up on the kiosks. And these kiosks were in the stupidest places where nobody's ever going to look at them. And it's just a big waste of money and time. And it's just, anyway. So the Amherst Select Board I took aim at them. And actually this poem was in the collegiate, I think, parts of it, just little snippets, for obvious reasons, which you are about to hear. Shall I begin?
Please, go ahead.
All right. It begins, it's got its own little preface here, italicized. But basically, you'll notice the inspiration is King James. So here we are. The pages of kiosks is dearth. We, the teeming 5 nabobs of the Amherst Select Board, speak thus, saying, we are the pedants who brought you out of sanity, out from the bondage of multiplicity. Heed us steadfastly, ye obsequious ones, for the town is a temple, and those who worship its magistrates must bow to them in homage and in pity. Wherefore, forsooth, Must we an holy banning place on every licentious poster placed in any place of places in Amherst placed, save the sacred kiosk? Thou shalt have no other posters before us. Thou shalt not make unto thee any creative image inappropriate to the lofty rafter-boarded dignity of the kiosk, nor shalt thou make its placing any place in heaven above, nor in the earth beneath, nor in the firmament surrounding, nor the waters around, nor in the places where people might see them and lust to peruse and read them, nor where people normally stand for long periods of time, and where it would be convenient to read such things. In none of these places shall your posters be placed. Side note, nor should posters be placed on the nabob's backs, only on the kiosk. Thou shalt not attach thy posters, but strictly within the thin kindling wood borders of the kiosk, for thy kiosk is a jealous and secluded kiosk, visiting no one anywhere because it stays in only one place constantly. Thou shalt not take the kiosk to a bonfire. Only posters, for they are the root of all evil and are biodegradable. Remember the red tape and keep it holy. Some sickly 6 years or so it took to construct the kiosk, and so it was. But fashioning thine own kiosk thou shouldest not endeavor at any time whatsoever, for only the select board may approve it. Neither shall thy sons nor thy daughters construct one, nor thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy dog, nor even your little grey gerbil with all white paws, except the left hind one. Honor thy fellow plebeian. Thou shalt not distract yon travelling operators of four-wheeled vehicles, whilst they transit themselves ever so cautiously in their vigilant alertness of wary watchfulness. They really are good drivers. Their anguish roars in the hungry throng of traffic. They weep, for they are distracted. A poster is dangling in the breeze. Oh, what roguish delinquents in their spurious fury have illicitly fastened some pink fluorescent ads. Have they no modesty? No shame? Pastels in Amherst! Thou shalt not fasten colourful papyrus upon the ways. All pastel postermongers shall suffer no end of torment in our bureaucracies of litigation. Doubtlessly, they shall be punished to the most fullest extent by the long superlative idiocy of our arm, where there shall be sweeping and gnashing of teeth. Thou shalt not steal the kiosk. Thou shalt not with thy posters commit creativity, expression, or publicity. Thou shalt not love it, exposure. Thine eyes may not endure it surely. Lo, the notions of thy neighbour's news. It is the adder's bite. Such did the kiosk say, and when the people saw the sterility of it, they wept amongst themselves. Here stands the husk of us. We've lost our omnibus. So they removed themselves afar by bus from us, like thus.
So the best part about all of that is that I'm the chair of the select board.
You have become what you hated.
Well, I don't know that I didn't write the poem.
Yes.
Are there still kiosks in Amherst?
No, I mean, like, flyers don't exist anymore, Tim.
Yeah, no one uses
America.
flyers.
I mean, except for, like,
now.
like very, a little bit in Northampton here and there, but.
Oh, well, thank you for reading that. I have to say, your performance of it reminded me a lot of Monty Python.
I did channel a bit of Michael Palin there.
Yeah. Thanks for reading that.
My pleasure.
All right. I want to check in with George and Ben to see if you had anything you wanted to read from your time.
Your era.
From your era.
I think the reason Ben was painting me and we were, smashing boom boxes and stuff is because I was never much of a writer. I was just more interested in reading poetry and being around it. So for everybody's sake, and I don't have a poem to read, and you should be thankful for that. Can
we convince Ben to drive to wherever you are now and paint you right now? That would be interesting.
Let's go.
Okay.
I have a lot of the notebooks, and I have a lot of those college year, like all kinds of things. George and I kept a dream journal. I have that stuff. Like I have a ton of that stuff, but it's all outside Boston in my mom's basement right now. and I'm in East Hampton, so I don't have any of that era. But I mean, like George is saying, like, it was, for me, it was so much more about like sort of living a kind of attitude and experimenting a lot, as opposed to trying to really build a craft. I've gone on to write a lot of fiction, and it's sort of much more where my heart has gone. But yeah, those were formative years nonetheless.
Okay, thank you. Stomping Jen, let's inject some estrogen into this conversation. You want to read?
You asked me to read this very specific thing.
I want to give this poem a preface. Now, I've mentioned before, I think I mentioned on this podcast and on this episode and in previous episodes, how I didn't notice Stomping Jen right away. She wasn't on my radar at all. I don't know why. I would come to these meetings and is that a horrible thing to say?
No.
I've said this before.
No.
And I think a lot of that is you kind of like to blend into the background anyways. You didn't do much to call attention to yourself.
No.
Right? And then
I did try to light my hair on fire.
We've heard this before. That is your specific mating ritual, is lighting your hair on fire. I don't respond to that.
Yeah. It's okay.
But you read this poem.
Are you sure? And you're sure it was this
I'm
one?
100% sure. And it got my attention. I said, "Oh, she's funny." Like whatever this is.
Yeah.
I haven't read this or heard it since the very 26 years ago you read it in that room.
Yeah.
So
I wrote it in high school. It's just funny because I found I got an A- on it.
Does that make me a creep?
No. Well, I was 18 when
You wrote it in high school?
we met. I graduated high school when I was 17. All right.
Is Chris Hansen going to come through the door?
The lie detector test.
No.
That was a lie.
No,
okay.
go ahead. Sorry.
All right. You want me to read this?
Please, go ahead.
All right. So this is called Ode to My Ex-Favorite Jeans. You lie dejected there in the corner. Did I beat you up too much? Stained, splattered with red paint. I loved you too much. But then, I'm sorry for wearing you out, wearing you on rainy days, dragging you through the mud, and now I only wear you to mow the lawn. I'm sorry. I guess I just got too fat. And this is the poem
that's the one.
Drew you to me. Not any of the other poems that I ever read.
Nope, that one.
That one. Does it still hold up?
It's funny.
It's funny.
Who amongst us doesn't have a pair of jeans they got too fat for?
That's your takeaway. I love it. You're funny.
That is one of my primary existential fears, is putting on a pair of pants and not having them fit me.
Oh my God.
I have pants hanging in my closet or up on my shelf that I'm afraid to put on because I'm afraid I'm too fat for them. Your poem speaks to me in a very real way.
I love that all these notebooks that I have are like covered in like Egyptian hieroglyphics.
All right, everyone goes through their high school Egyptian phase. That's fine.
But then I tattooed it on my chest. Okay.
All right. Well, let's hear from if he's still there. His camera is off. Let's go to Ted. See if Ted was able to dig up a poem. There he is.
I was not able to dig up a poem from this era. But I feel like Tim's two epics cover for that.
Epochs, yes. They were
epic poems.
Yes. I'm going to pronounce that word epoch.
Oh my God.
That's how I like to say
Please
it.
don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's going to take us to, should we save Joshua Michael Stewart for last?
There's nobody else. Oh, you want to go.
I have a poem.
Oh, he has a poem.
Should I read it?
You are dying to read it.
I'm going to read it. Now, this is sort of longish, and it's a revised version.
All your poems are longish.
Yeah.
And he's been writing a poem. How long is it? Like 27 pages?
Yeah, it's like going on 4 years. This is not that poem. But so this is very self-serious. It's not fun. It's not funny. So settle in. I see George just lean back a little bit. So snuggle into your chairs. We're going to get through this together, okay? I promise. All right. I'll share the reflection afterwards. I have a story related to this.
Just read the fucking poem.
Okay. Does it need any music?
Oh my God, no.
All right, fine. All right, this is called Basic Training, summer of 1992. The Missouri sun, a drum, pounded time on our heads. Bald flowers in the blazing heat. Some of us wilted, most stood tall, turning toward the light. In defiance of failure's sickly sweet voice, beads of sweat hung on our necks, salty jewels for kings of conformity, crowns of Kevlar for each sunburned head, making us all equally worthless to our shouting tormentors. Pigskin coffins for my feet, one size too small, white-hot numbness, bees inside my toes, stinging, aching bones. Trench foot flesh peels, rotting skin, held together by olive green socks. Most of us changed, becoming harder, tanned, fierce, loving the battle cry. Blood! 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 How did the transformation to killer from boy come so easily? Rifles with names replace the faces you can't remember, now only ghosts. Aim center mass for the plastic heart. Headshots are just as good. Nights are lonely, so you fold your clothes, shine your boots, stopping at the reflection of a stranger. Who is this shoe polish phantom? Sleep comes quickly, always dreamless. Float into darkness on gunpowder airfoils. Too damn tired for unconscious self-reflection.
You're so funny.
That's it. Now that is the poem I read, the very first poem I read in public ever.
I remember that. I remember that day. The first time you came to interrupt your flow there. I was very impressed by that poem because I had been to basic training and I did not enjoy it either.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know exactly how it felt, and that you earned my immediate respect for sure when you read that poem, and yeah. So and you breathed a breath of fresh air into our group, which really, I mean, put some wind in our sails in terms of just like, you know, not just more people, but just like you guys have been saying, the community that we had. And yeah, so Sawtooth.
Yeah,
this is my deep home snapping for you.
Thanks, man. And that's what I was going to share. I remember Tim O coming up to me afterwards saying that was really good. I was in basic training too. Yeah. Like, I get it.
Yeah.
And then like I was like, oh wow, okay, I might fit in here. Mm-hmm. Like this could be a good place. And I came back. But I remember being like incredibly nervous reading it. Like I can still, despite, just so everybody knows, 2 weeks ago I claimed that I had no mind's eye, that I couldn't picture anything in my mind. It's turning out to not be true, by the way. I do apparently have a mind's eye because I can remember and see myself standing there in that room with my hand shaking and holding the paper and reading it. So
you're so ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was it. That was the very first poem I ever read in public. So there it is. Let's go to Joshua Michael Stewart.
Joshua.
Let's see what he's got.
What did you dig up for us tonight?
Well, I unfortunately did not dig up anything old because I don't even think I have any of that stuff anymore. I think that long ago went into the burn pile. But I selected two things. I hope it's okay. I can read newer stuff.
Absolutely. Can I ask you a quick question though?
Yeah.
Why did it go into the burn pile? Was that a conscious choice, or was it just a consequence of like moving and you were like, I'm getting rid of this stuff? Or did you burn all of that stuff up on purpose?
I mean, I mean, to be honest, I more likely probably do have a lot of it somewhere. But, you know, I mean, I just know I progressed much, much more since then. So, you know, I didn't really find any reason to keep them. I did keep them for a long time.
Yeah.
But then I was like, okay, I don't need this anymore.
Okay. I was just
Because
curious.
I also have, you know, since then, you know, the last 20 years after that, I've, you know, I've have multiple, you know, notebooks of things. So,
All right. Hit us up. What do you got?
all right. So this is a little prose poem, and this is something newer, but it kind of would be something that I would probably write back in those days. So this is called "This Is Where You Are, and This Is How You Got Here." I'm reading at a cafe table that's too small and too wobbly, but where I can keep an eye on whoever slips in and out of the unisex bathroom. So when I need to go, I won't surprise someone who'd be in no mood for surprises. Because even when you knock and wait, the person behind the door doesn't always answer. Or sometimes with dishes clanking and people shouting over jazz that spatters from speakers, you can't hear the person's nervous reply. And you creak the door, and there they are, elbows on their knees. And it's here, the moment you can never take back. The moment when all other regrets and mistakes flash through your mind. And all you can do is turn away and say, "I'm sorry. Please forgive me." And I have this poem. This is brand spanking new. So in the spirit of the Poetry Society, I'm using you guys as guinea pigs. And lately I've been working on a series of poems that are odes, eulogies, you know, other homages, tributes of that nature. And this one is actually called Eulogy for Gary. Gary never liked to do anything easy, like cook eggs and bacon, or fold bath towels while watching TV. No, Gary would much rather memorize the periodic table of elements or repair his destroyed reputation after he was caught dancing naked with a headless mannequin in his office. He was an accountant and loathed every plus and minus of his job. He wasn't the type for displays of affection. He had a hard time looking people in the eye. He'd jot down on scrap paper, "Look at people when talking to them," and glance at it when he attended social functions. He wasn't like that in high school. He played varsity football and girls were crazy over him. But something changed when he twisted his knee and lost his scholarship to Bowling Green. He worked the line at a Ford plant for a few years and then earned his degree from a college you never heard of before. He married Lisa, who we all know ran off with her chiropractor. It's a good thing they never had kids. Gary was a good friend, a hell of a man. He never put on airs or judged anyone. He let me keep my chickens in his basement after we had that flood 2 springs ago, and I had to rebuild my coop. You could tell he was lonely, though he never fessed up to it. It wasn't so much in his eyes, but how his mouth rested in his jaw. Not a tightness, not in anger or brooding, but more of a resolve, a surrender. Loneliness will turn you desperate, and desperation will tempt you to do strange things, things out of character. I still don't see why they had to print his name in the newspaper. And once I saw that security video his coworker uploaded to the internet, I knew it was all over. But that's no excuse for what Gary did. He didn't have to shoot all those people.
That took a turn.
I don't want to give that the celebratory
You
noise.
don't have to.
No. Oh, man. I love hearing you read.
Thank
Somehow you don't sound like a douche when you read. Is that just me?
Oh, boy.
You know how people get that thing? I think I had it,
Oh, my God.
right?
Oh, are you talking about the what they call the poetry voice?
Yeah, Timo didn't have it, but and you definitely don't have it, but I think I had it when I read my poem.
I used to have it until people who knew better than I did told me to quit it.
How did you quit it? Like, what did you do differently?
The simplest way is they said, you should read as you speak.
Okay.
So, you read just in this voice.
Yeah.
A lot of people will they put on this this false voice, like they call poetry voice, or the worst is slam poets, where for better or for worse, I don't particularly have anything against slam poetry, but it seems like every single slam poet has the same cadence and same rhythm in every single poem. So,
But you're a musician too, so.
Yeah, but it's different.
No, yeah, I'm just talking about rhythm and cadence. And
Yeah, well,
Right,
thanks for debuting that. Is that the debut of that piece here? That's good.
Debut-ish, yes.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing it. That was fantastic. Okay. Some of us have grown in leaps and bounds. That's obvious. So I wanted to ask you all, who has continued to write poetry?
besides Josh.
Besides Joshua Michael Stewart. We all know you write poetry. You're published. We know. But I want to hear from these other folks.
Negatory.
Yeah. Anyone here, after you left the Poetry Society, did you continue to write poetry for a time? Are you still writing poetry? Timo?
Well, yeah, of course I kept writing for a while, but we had our own, after we graduated, we tried to continue. I don't know if you guys remember this. We tried to continue a digital email correspondence version of the Poetry Society, which I called Ben Trovato. Does that ring a bell?
No.
You don't remember Ben Trovato?
No. Do you?
No, I don't remember it.
It's probably good because it ended in a catastrophe of sorts, social catastrophe of sorts. But
like email wasn't. It was like a baby.
A good medium.
It was like a baby thing at that point in time. Like,
true.
it was like very in its infancy. Email, social media didn't exist.
No. All right, so you continued.
Sorry,
all right,
Ben Trovato. I don't remember this.
All right, so Timo continued
Okay.
an email poetry society in some form. Did you continue to write? And are you writing now?
I scribble now and then, but I generally write something down, and if I don't get it to some sort of fruition in the first sitting, I usually don't come back to it. So I have to have the fortitude to get through it the first time, at least to be impressed with myself, to want to come back to it and edit it. Otherwise, it just sits there on my computer file or in my notebook, and it withers away, and I get distracted by other things. So, but
Okay.
I have created some pieces since the day. I'd have to dig them up, but I've already read two, so
Do you think they will be shared in some way?
It could be.
Okay. We'll look forward to that. I want to ask George, are you still writing poetry? Are you doing some kind of poetry-like performance art these days? Has that continued for you, or have you moved on?
No, I frankly never really was much of a writer. I really was just more interested in reading it, and I still read actively. Actually, I just got my last issue of Jubilat, which is a UMass produced journal. They just ceased publishing that. This final one, but still very actively reading, and I do a lot of creative work outside of writing. But no, I was never really much a writer. More interested in reading and processing and trying to just see beyond my end of my nose.
Okay, thank you. Ted, what about you?
Oh, well, I think maybe just because Natalie's not here, I might win the award for being the furthest afield from doing anything creative. Which is to say, no, I do not write poetry, nor do I do anything particularly artistic and creative. I've gone on to become an engineer, so I'm fitting with the stereotype.
And there's some creativity in that, obviously. It takes a different form, but...
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
I appreciate that, but I think definitely outside of the kind of creativity we all are thinking about right now.
Sure. I'll accept that. Okay, well, maybe the spark will hit you at some point and you'll get back to it. Let's ask Ben. I want to know what Ben is up to.
Poetry-wise, poetry never really took root in any kind of formal craft sense of the word. I never really stopped performing. All this time, I've had a pretty steady run of continuing on in the kind of avant-garde style performance art, monologue, storytelling. And that has been a phenomenal way to express myself. For my own sort of sanity and well-being, it's been like a constant, which is pretty, I'm very grateful for that. And all that stuff began at UMass. Poetry never took root, but fiction really did. I went to grad school in Naropa in Colorado for a couple of years, early 2000s, and then started writing basically writing novels. And I published a novel in 2017. And over this last year, basically like COVID hell, sort of needing to survive this, started writing a long kind of history of Maine kind of. It's a long story, but I wrote a book this year, and I'm halfway through another one. And I actually have a third one that I'm going to just keep plowing through. So there's a lot of writing happening, but it's just become something entirely other.
That's fantastic. And what's your novel? What's the name of your novel?
It's called The Autograph of Steve Industry. And it's based on a project that George is intimately familiar with. It's this band that he and I and our friend Aaron started at UMass, more or less. Just an improvisational kind of rock band it was a concept band where we would perform as a bar band outside Boston, like kind of performing our Boston roots. And it was mostly improvised, and then we started playing live, and we had recorded some stuff so we could like replay some of those songs. And this whole world of this character emerged from that. And for a long time, I was like, I got to do something with this character, like beyond the music itself. So it turned into this completely insane book. So yeah, it was published by a small press called Magic Helicopter. And I don't even know, it's probably out there somewhere, but you can try to search for it.
Okay, cool. Well, go find it, people.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool.
I actually own it.
You do.
I was trying to find it, but I couldn't find it. It's somewhere in where you probably can't even see it, but I got this huge pile, and I know it's in there somewhere.
All right, Stomping
awesome.
Jen, are you writing poetry?
We already covered this.
Oh,
no.
you're doing collage art, right?
Well, not even doing that much
All right.
these days, but yeah.
Now, I'm happy to report I wrote 2 collections of poetry.
In
After
your drawer.
No, they're done. I've self-published them.
Where can
They're
you find
complete
them?
works. You can't find them anywhere.
Right. They're on your computer
self-published.
file.
Yeah, they're on my computer. But
yeah.
2 complete works, and I've got this other poem you mentioned.
Yeah,
that
the
is
poem.
like 20 pages long.
And he talks about occasionally.
Yeah. It has crows in it, in case you're interested. And someday I will publish. I will read it on the podcast.
It'll be its own podcast.
Yes, it
and
will.
I will not be in the house.
Oh, yes, you will. I need you to sit here through the entire reading. All right. Well, I'm going to say that the UMass Poetry Society was a success. The founding of it and its continuance, right? That handoff from Tim O and Stomping Jen to George and Ben.
Uh-huh.
That
What
whole
happened after you guys
that
left?
whole pile of stuff was a success in my
You
estimation
don't
because
know what
we've
happened
got.
after
Well, let
they
me
left?
finish.
Oh my God.
Because people continued to be creative. Some people went on to have other fulfilling ventures, like being engineers. But we got a real published poet out of this whole thing, Joshua Michael Stewart, right? And a published author.
I think it was
Ben.
more about that we all built a community, and here we are, and we're having a nice discussion.
Success is the only. No.
Oh my God.
Okay, you're right.
Yeah, thank
All
you.
right.
Appreciate it.
So
But what happened after?
what happened after?
What's the
I just want to know, like, whatever people are comfortable sharing, where has life taken you after?
The group the society did continue on, I think, in a similar way. Ben mentioned Mike, and I can't remember the woman's name, but the 2 of them did carry it on after we had left, because Ben graduated and I moved to Mexico for a year, so we were just gone. But the society did continue on beyond us, and I'm not sure what happened after that.
cool?
Yeah.
And yeah, just express, gratitude, deep gratitude to Tim and you all for creating that. It was definitely really grounding to have an organization like that, and to get to meet people and feel like, somewhat legitimized in our interests, and I really appreciate you all doing that sort of foundational work, and I hope we did you proud.
I think you did, based on what I'm hearing here.
Yeah.
Now I want to know, whatever people are comfortable sharing, what did you go on to do after being an undergraduate at UMass? What did you go on to do with you? Whatever you want to share, I'll go.
Oh, you'll go?
Do you want me to go?
Sure.
I started a career as a medical writer for a time.
Mm-hmm.
Then I went after that to work in the field of instructional technology at a large university.
Mm-hmm.
So I went and work at a university now, and I'm also heavily involved in union work,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Which poetry and songs are a big part of union work and the culture of unions. But as soon as somebody breaks out a guitar in a union setting and starts singing, I head out the door. I cannot stand that. I just get the douche chills and I run.
The douche chills.
Now, Stomping Jen, what have you done?
Oh my God, I don't know. What have I
Tell
done?
us. Where did life take you?
Where did life take me? That's a really great question. I have no idea. Let's see. I worked in retail for almost 5 years, and decided needed to go back to school. So we came back to this area, and I got my MBA. And after that, I had 2 jobs in my life. But in the middle of that, we had children. And so then I struck out on my own. So basically, I help small businesses in and around the Pioneer Valley. And I'm also on the select board. I also started the Quabbin Arts Association here in our town.
Yeah.
I was involved in the cultural council here in town, and then I got on the select board. So I do a lot of volunteerism.
You're a busybody.
I do a lot of organizing of people.
I think the official title is busybody.
Busybody. I do. This is what I do. People are always like, how do you know so much about everything? I'm like,
Yeah.
social media is like my job. I basically go on and I find all the cool shit that's happening all over the place. And
You put it together.
I put it all together.
Like a collage.
Like a collage. Look at you being all insightful.
Yeah. Timo, tell us, where did life take you after the Poetry Society?
I got a job immediately out of college working at a private school for dyslexics. So I basically became a language training tutor. And from there, that job was in backwater New York, more cows than people in that town. So loneliness set in, and I decided to move to Vermont, where there are even more cows per capita. And I lived in my father's hunting cabin for a while, and I worked at a bookstore, Barnes & Noble. Was it Barnes & Noble? Yeah, I think it was it was Borders. I worked at Borders. And I went insane and decided that Ted was my confidant at that stage. I remember talking to Ted, and I said, Ted, what should I do with my life? And I don't know what I'm doing here. And he's just like, well, you should just do something different. And I was like, well, I could go to South Korea, teach English. And that's what I did. He's like, yeah, you should do that. And I did.
Can I share a memory from that phase of your life when you're going crazy? I remember you invited Stomping Jen and I to your cabin in up New York or Vermont.
It was Vermont.
And did
you ever make it up?
We did make it. We came to visit you. And I remember stumbling across a list that you had on the table.
Oh, no.
And this list was a step-by-step list of instructions on what you needed to do throughout the day. And I was like, terrible. He's losing his mind here, because it was stuff like, wake up, brush my teeth, eat.
Are you sure it was like a poem?
But no strawberry jelly, only honey on the English muffin. Like these really,
that doesn't sound like me at all.
Yeah, this really detailed list of how you were to conduct your entire day. And I was like, we got to get out of here, Stomping Jen. We're going to end up eaten alive or something. He's going to kill us and eat us.
Covered in honey.
Yeah.
Or strawberry jelly.
So we took off. We got the hell out of there.
I do remember going to visit you up in Vermont.
All right. Well, that sounds like a great journey.
Mm-hmm. But no, now you're in Taiwan.
Now you live overseas, right?
Yeah, I live in Taiwan. I was in Korea for about 14 months, and then I went back to the States for a stint, and then I got my ass out of there, and I came to Taiwan, and I've been here ever since, teaching English as a second language.
Nice.
Doing some editing work. I've done some materials for writing. Basically English. Teaching materials, this and that, test creation, curriculum development, yada yada.
Cool. Awesome. Ben, you shared some of what you're up to. Anything else you want to tell us?
I spent a lot of time in education fields, substitute teaching, after school programs, summer camp stuff. Found my way into adjuncting at Holyoke Community College. Did that for 6 years, and then got hired full time to teach English at HTC. So I've been doing that. That's what I've been doing largely for like 12 years, I guess now. It's just a crazy amount of time. I had a kid in 2013, and that's a big deal. And that has led me into like a discovery of public education as like a massive zone of, it's incredibly important. And also it seems like it's in a lot of trouble. And I've found myself as a kind of activist now in like public education in East Hampton, and I'm running for school committee, which is something I never would have envisioned myself doing. Like if you asked me that 20 years ago, I'd like give you the finger and storm away. But that's what I'm doing now. I'm like, that's suddenly awesome. I'm in this new world. And it's cool. It's like, I feel like, I'm like in my 40s, and it's like, oh yeah, you can still do shit. You can still change. You can still experience problematic newness. And that's a good thing. I still feel like I'm like alive, which is, that'll do. I'm into that.
Kudos to you for getting involved, because a lot of people like to complain and not get involved. So really, thank you. That's great.
Yeah. When Trump got elected, I felt like, oh shit, I'm either going to like die of like terror, or I'm going to have to do something. Like I'm actually going to have to do something. Mm-hmm. But the only thing I could think to do was like like outside in the neighborhood. Like it didn't seem like I could affect change in any other way. So it was like, okay, let's go down the street to the local elementary school where my kid is and like try to help.
Yeah.
And it's just gone from there. So it's pretty cool. It's been a fun adventure.
Very cool.
Cool. Thanks, Ben. Ted, where did your journey take you? What do you want to share with us?
Well, I feel like I have two memories I wanted to share. The first was just an add-on to the story of Tim's cabin, which is, I think I went up there at least once, possibly twice, in the dead of winter, where we sort of spent a couple days just holed up in the winter in Vermont in Tim's dad's cabin, getting drunk, which really reminded me of it's a Hemingway story, The 3-Day Blow, which is about two young guys who get drunk in one of their dad's cabins, actually. But I remember thinking at the time, I was like, whoa, this is very strange, but I am very glad, Tim, you also got out of the cabin and over to Southeast Asia. The other one was a piece of advice from you, Sawtooth, which I blatantly did not follow.
Uh-oh.
That I have a very sort of strong recollection for. I guess maybe because I went against it. But first, I remember you were sort of older, and it's one of those things when you're in your early 20s or, just starting college. Anybody who's like older than 20 basically seems old.
Oh yeah.
I don't recall how old you were at the time, but I know you had been in the military. So you were sort of I guess what we'd call a non-traditional student.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. Yep.
And I was like, well, I should listen to what he has to say because he's definitely wiser than I am.
No.
And I was thinking at the time of changing my major into biology. And you had also been a biology major, if I recall correctly.
Microbiology. Yes. Close.
Yes.
Yep.
And you said to me, I remember this, said, don't do it. Said, this is a terrible idea. You shouldn't do that.
Oh, no.
Career prospects, terrible. What are you going to do? You're going to graduate? What are you going to do with that degree?
Yeah.
And, I was like, okay, I think it's good advice, but what the fuck did I know at, 20 or 19, whenever this conversation took place. Yeah. So I was like, I'm going to go do this anyway. So I bounced around for a while, kind of lived all over the place, doing ecology and evolutionary biology fieldwork, and eventually decided, you were right. Like there's really nothing here for this undergrad degree. So I went and got my PhD, and went on to do a postdoc for a while studying spiders in Brazil. And my postdoc was in theoretical evolutionary biology, building computer models. And then I went on to work for the National Science Foundation in Boulder. And that was in 2014. And I was sort of clear to me that like academia was not going to work out the way I'd hoped it would. Mm-hmm. And I got recruited to come out to Silicon Valley. And so now, that was 7 years ago. So now I lead a team of machine learning engineers at Apple, and I live in San Francisco by the ocean.
That's awesome.
So you evolved, right?
Yeah. I evolved.
Yeah, and my advice was terrible advice because doing all of that led you to where you are.
It's true.
That is true. It was a very circuitous path.
Yeah.
Non-traditional. I work with a lot of like people who, went to Stanford and got their degree in computer science or got an MBA from Harvard. So it's, I'm sort of stand out for being somewhat different, but it's all worked out in the end.
Yeah.
That's cool. Awesome.
Very cool.
Yeah. And I enjoy following your journey on social media. I really do. Like I'm so pleased to be able to see where you've been, where you're going, and I look forward to seeing what else you do. So that's awesome. George, tell us what you did. Where'd you, whatever you're comfortable sharing, where did life take you after the Poetry Society?
Yeah, all over, lots of different things. Continue to do a lot of organizing and performances and art related, sort of cultural related things. And my current job is I'm the general manager and programmer at Amherst Cinema. So that's like independent films. And I do a lot of kind of the same stuff, like moderating Q&As and talking about ideas, which is very much in line with what the Poetry Society helped shape. And I also started a small business, which is like a vintage arcade and a restaurant and bar. And yeah, I've DJ'd a lot, and I really sort of just stay as much as I can connected to sort of cultural events, and that's really, I think, the thing I'm most interested in is, and it's proven to not be a great career path over the last 18 months, which is, I really enjoy being around people and connecting people and being in groups of people, all things which are now public health hazards and we cannot do for the foreseeable future. So, seeing what else I can manage to do. But yeah, that's been my basic path, and yeah, Ben and I haven't performed together recently, but I wouldn't rule it out. We did make a promise to each other to play once a year, which we promptly broke. But I don't rule out that we'll get back together. And then the group he mentioned that was sort of the genesis of his really wonderful. He's down playing it, but his really wonderful first novel. That group also, we do have an engagement for a wedding that is sort of continuously postponed. So certainly we'll perform once more. Well, not certainly. I mean, who knows? But anyways, yeah, being around people and being around artwork in whatever shape it takes has definitely been sort of the my main interest, and I think will continue to be.
All right, cool. And let's hope this pandemic gets its shit together and we are able to get all back together again. Because if I have to miss another concert,
oh God, no,
I'm going to lose it.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
I have tickets, almost front row seat tickets for Roger Waters next summer. And God damn it, if I miss that concert.
Okay, then. All righty.
Well, I don't mean anything. No, I mean, I'm
all right. Josh, anything else you want to say? We know that you've invested a lot of time in your poetry.
What did you do, Josh? What did you do after this college and this poetry society we've been talking about here?
Well, yes, again, poetry is my thing. And that's where I put most of my energy. I knew, I knew poetry is what I wanted to dedicate my life to. And I also knew there was no money in it. So whatever job that I would have would always be secondary to my poetry, and would be something that could support my time and effort into the craft. But for the last 22 years, I've actually been a counselor for the disabled. And I work in Norwood, actually, which is about an hour and a half away.
Yeah. You've been doing that a long time.
Yeah. 22 years.
Yeah.
So, and I just spent 6 hours in the ER today with one of my clients because his diabetes went all haywire. They put him on a new medication, and it put his levels like over 300.
Hey.
So that's what I did for the most part of today.
Jeez. Well, that's good, important work.
Yeah,
thank you for doing it.
For sure.
So, Stomping Jen.
Yeah.
As one of the founders
Yeah.
of the UMass Amherst Poetry Society,
Yeah.
do you feel we've discussed this enough?
Yeah.
Is there more you want to say?
No, I think we did what we set out to do. It's been very pleasant to connect
Yes.
with all of your faces. I'm very
Yes.
excited to see you all.
Yeah, I want to say thank you to you all for coming on here and talking to us about this experience that is meaningful in the life of Stomping Jen and I.
For
I
sure.
mean, we frequently talk about it, and like she said, we've as a consequence of this meeting and this reading of poems, there two life forms cruising around this planet now, 14 years old and 11 years old. So,
Yep.
And doing their own thing. So here we are, right?
That's right.
So thank you sincerely from the bottom of our hearts for coming on here and sharing and talking with us. We really enjoyed it, right?
Yeah.
All right. To our listeners, I have one thing to say. Thank
Go
you.
write some poetry.
No.
You'll never know where it takes you.
They might read it in
Go do something exciting.
They might read it in a terrible voice. We don't want to encourage that.
Gosh.
No. Thank you. We love you. Thank you for listening. Right? If you're not already, please subscribe, download, leave us a review. You know the whole thing, right?
All the things.
Connect with us on social media. What else?
I don't know.
All right. You
We
don't
love
know?
you.
I don't know. We love you, right?
We love
So,
you.
what are we going to say? Are we going to say bye?
Yeah. Are we doing like a group?
Yeah. Let everybody unmute, say goodbye, and then you and I will say goodbye.
All right.
Does that work?
All right.
Then we'll play our outro music.
All right. Sounds like a good time.
All right, everybody.
Hey,
just
everyone.
drop a goodbye, however you want to do it.
Bye now.
Bye.
Bye
Read
now.
poetry, buy poetry. It's still very important, even if you're not an undergrad
That's right.
idiot like we were.
That's right. Thank you.
Fare thee well.
All right, folks.
Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Bye now.
This world of ours, ever growing smaller, must avoid becoming a community of dreadful fear and hate. Those who have freedom will understand also its heavy responsibility. That all who are insensitive to the needs of others will learn charity, and that the sources, scourges of poverty, disease, and ignorance will be made disappear from the earth. And that in the goodness of time, all peoples will come to live together in a peace guaranteed by the binding force of mutual respect and love. I shall never cease to do what little I can to help the world advance along that road.